Welcome into Triple Zeros. I'm your host, Josh Buckhalter. We got a lot to get into, man, so let's get right into it and not waste any more time. First things up, we're going to talk about the NFL Pro Bowl voting came out. There were a few noticeable snubs and a couple of questionable calls. I don't necessarily want to say that they were wrong, but they were definitely questionable. The biggest snub to me, well, okay, let me say this. Let me rephrase that. They're not necessarily any snubs. I think they were all a little questionable on the surface, but you could kind of see the logic behind all but maybe one. The first one, Tom Brady missed the Pro Bowl. We'll get that out of the way. Patriots fatigue. Brady's having a really rough year. His completion percentage is not anywhere near what it's used to be. Obviously, he doesn't have the weapons that he's used to having there in New England. Julian Edelman's even banged up now, and they're just continuing. He's continuing to fight through it, but they're just not. They're 11-3, most of the strength of their defense. Brady right now is. So I'm trying to pull him up. Having issues with that. Brady right now is completing only 60% of his passes. 3,500 yards, 21 touchdowns, 7 picks. He's not having a horrible year, but for Tom Brady, 60% completion is not great. So that alone is just not. And he's looked off more often than not. Like I said, he doesn't have the weapons that he's used to having. So a lot of people saw that as a snub because he's playing better than his numbers would suggest. He's had a lot of injuries, a lot of inexperience at the skill positions, at the wide receiver position specifically. But that's not necessarily a snub. He's, like I said, he's not playing up to his standards. Maybe it's a okay season for a lot of people. 21-7, 3-1. Everybody would take 3-1, I guess. But it's just not. It hasn't been. If you've seen it, it hasn't been anywhere near anything like the Tom Brady that most people have seen, where he's very precise, very quick with the ball. You've had a lot more of the questioning of whether Father Time is caught up to him or not. But staying in the quarterback position, Aaron Rodgers made the Pro Bowl over Dak Prescott, and I can't help but feel like it clearly has something to do with his the team's record. But I feel like that's kind of missing the point of the Pro Bowl. It's supposed to be recognizing their individual accomplishments, and head to head, the numbers would favor Dak. We'll get to where it's a little bit tricky, but Rodgers is completing 63% of his passes, Dak 65%. Rodgers has 3,400 yards. Dak has 4,300 yards. Rodgers is attempting 7.3 yards per attempt. Dak's at 8.4, and then Rodgers has a 12-1 quarterback ratio. Dak's got a 26-11. Now that's more than likely where they're finding that difference. I guess the yardage, the near 1,000 yards, and the extra yards per attempt are negated by those extra 9 picks, but we also can't remember how many receivers or how many passes Dak's receivers have dropped. They led the league in receiving or in drops for a while. I'm not sure if they still do now, but they definitely were leading the league in drops for some time. And who knows how many more touchdowns he would have had. Just saying. I know one team is sitting at the the top of their division right now, with a chance, I believe, to go to the top of the conference, if I'm not mistaken. If they were to, they still have a chance to get the number 1 seed overall. So, yikes. And the other team is at 7-7, looking like the dog at the dance, but still a division winner. Like I said, considering all the drops that the Cowboys had early in the season, and then seeing here in Chicago, seeing Rodgers do his damage more often than I'd like, I can't help but feel like this is just reputation. And we see this a lot. We'll get to more from and actually next week we're going to stay in this division in one of these two teams with the eyes of the Packers. I just feel like this is a legacy thing. He had a good year. Rodgers definitely had a good 24-2. I'm not going to argue with that. But he had the same kind of year last year. People said he had a bad year. So I'm not sure exactly where things necessarily changed to have everybody feeling like, oh, no, it's different now because, Aaron was able to go out and complete some passes. Again, maybe it's just me having, as a scorned Bears fan, having seen it up close and personal for years, what Rodgers does. Last year he was 25-2. So I guess you can say that he's got a chance to throw a couple more touchdowns, and he had 1,000 more yards last year. See, that's where my loss comes in. He had a worse completion percentage last year, but he had 1,000 more yards. He had one more touchdown, But that was one more touchdown for the season, the same one interceptions. But I'm just not seeing it. I'm just not seeing it. I know he's a bad man. He owns the business. It's not biased. It's literally just off of what I've seen from him this year. The other one in this division is Khalil Mack making it over Preston Smith. I initially was kind of like, huh? But then I also understand it. I'm not necessarily sure I would have gone with Mack, but I do get it. There's two players who could have gone over from their Packers. Preston Smith and Zadarius Smith. And actually, the issue here, I think, is that they both play for the same team. Mack led the league in 29 quarterback hurries. He only had 7.5 sacks. He had 43 pressures, though. That tied Zadarius Smith and was well ahead of Preston Smith. Preston had 11.5 sacks. Zadarius had 10. And like I said, I think that what really happened here is that they both kind of cancel each other out. It's kind of hard to say which one is actually dominating when you know that both of them are whipping guys on the edge. So I on the surface I was like, and then again, I'm also a person who's advocated for Mack knowing the impact that he's had without having the major splash plays. We saw him get the strip sacks and kind of take over against the Lions a little bit, but that's not, everybody was wanting more from him this year. Hakeem Hicks went down, and that obviously hurt his ability to go after opposing quarterbacks. But what's worse is that he's been triple teamed. He's been held to no end, and you can say that happens on every play. So I'm not gonna act like that's some kind of excuse for him to not be putting up major numbers. I'm just letting you know the truth. And then lastly, and this is the one where this is probably a snub, even though they both made it. It's just one of those ones like huh? Dalvin Cook starting over Christian McCaffrey. Dalvin Cook has 1,100 yards, 1,135, 4.5 yards per carry, 13 rushing touchdowns. Christian McCaffrey has 1,300 rushing yards, 4.9 yards per carry, and 14 rushing touchdowns. That alone, he's been playing 99% of the season with a backup quarterback, a guy who's proven that he's probably nothing more than a backup quarterback in Kyle Allen. So much so that they're going to Will Grier for this next game. I'm not sure how that. And then you go to the receiving numbers. Cook, 53 receptions for 519 yards. Christian McCaffrey, 94 receptions for 814 yards and 4 touchdowns. Christian McCaffrey's having the season of some lead receivers. Cook's out here going a good number 2, good slot guy. But like, how did he get the nod over Christian McCaffrey? That I just don't understand. Maybe it won't matter because Cook will be probably recovering from the number of injuries he's going through right now. He's got a shoulder, I believe, right at this moment. Maybe they'll be going to the Super Bowl. I doubt it, but maybe the Vikings. That is. I just don't see. I don't know what they were seeing. This is like the voting was a little weird. Those are the only ones that really kind of threw me off. In other Pro Bowl news, though, the Baltimore Ravens led the NFL in Pro Bowls with 12 selections. Lamar obviously will be the MVP. Is this their pick though? Their peak though? Is this the top of the mountain for them? I'm not sure if they are able to make this run. It's going to have to be Lamar taking more steps than he's already taken this year as a passer. Teams are going to game plan to do what we saw the Chargers do last year, where they kind of get those hybrid safety linebacker types to kind of float around closer to the line of scrimmage, not necessarily at the line of scrimmage, but closer to it, right around the linebacker area, to just spy him all together, create that kind of shield for him from taking off and just gashing defenses, a la Mike Vick in his hay. I'm not sure who can do it though. Chargers not going to be there this year. The Patriots defense, we saw that Lamar gave them fits. So I'm not sure necessarily who's going to stop them. Maybe if they run up against Kansas City, then, it becomes a problem because Kansas City, as we know, can put up points, and that was where they struggled, and that was a loss for them. I just don't see any other team being capable of taking them down this year. Again, the Patriots have a defense, but I don't think they're going to do. They didn't beat them in the regular season. I don't see them beating in the postseason. Now, it's a whole different ball game, and Bill Belichick loves to is known for shutting down those younger quarterbacks, especially in that kind of time, that moment. I would like to see a Baltimore and Houston matchup, though, if only because I know Lamar would be able to throw on the Texans secondary, and Deshaun Watson's a magician, so he can throw on anybody. And then last piece of Pro Bowl news. Shout out to Marcus Peters. Man got traded in the middle of the season and still made the Pro Bowl. That's dope. We've heard about him returning the interceptions and stuff. We saw the emotion that he had when he played his former team. It's just great to see. Can't nothing hold you down. Can't nothing hold. Can't nothing tap my pride. Can't nothing hold me down. Oh no, got to keep on moving. My man made the Pro Bowl. Probably would have made it 2 conferences. That's Pee Wee Kirkland status right there. I like to see stuff like that. Speaking of playoffs, though, going ahead, the most dangerous playoff teams and the ones I'm going to pick from each conference. Obviously, I think the most dangerous one or not obviously, but is Houston, because they can play like world beaters any given night, but they can also play down to their competition. Like they play the Bucks, and I wouldn't be surprised if they lost, just because the Bucks have a passing attack and are going to put the pressure on them to keep passing. And sometimes Houston just doesn't seem to have that game plan where they're ready to attack for an entire 4 quarters. Tennessee, if they are able to make it, would be the surprise of the year to me. And they're a dangerous team clearly because they run the ball and they play good defense. That ground control, ball control, and defending well are recipes for success. Now, that'll obviously mean that they're going to have to, in the playoffs, they're going to have to rely on Ryan Tannehill. I'm not sure how comforting that is for Titans fans, but that's definitely something they're going to have to address when the time comes. I'm just surprised at the resurgence that they've had and this resurrection that Ryan Tannehill has had at this point in his career. When he went to Tennessee, I was kind of surprised, like, why? It's the same guy as Marcus Mariota, talented but oft injured, never really reached his peak, and yet here he is thriving in a new situation. I'm not sure if that's more damning on Marcus Mariota or the Miami Dolphins, or if they should just send him to Miami and find out for once and for all, or what. But shout out to Ryan Tannehill, too, for doing his thing. And then we're going to wrap it up for the NFL portion with Tom Coughlin got fired from the Jacksonville Jaguars. And it's not something that you want to, I'm not going to celebrate it, just mentioning it because it's notable. We have so much turmoil coming out with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They had the NFLPA thing I talked about in the last episode, where at the end of it they signed off saying basically that when players are going to choose their next teams, they might want to consider other options because of how the Jaguars were taxing Dante Fowler, who ended up now with the Rams. Tom Coughlin was, I'm guessing is going to be the scapegoat for this. We know how many rules he had and how he could also try to do things his own way. So he wanted to implement rules and want to follow them, and that is all kind of a transgression of you letting the organization be run that way, of you letting guys being taken advantage of, being forced to do things that violate the CBA. That's an issue, especially for, like I said, I mentioned this in the last episode. Shad Khan has got such a positive image around the league. I was shocked to hear that was what was going on down there and how bad it was, but it was always had to be something because of the way that players were trying to get out of there so fast. So it was a shock, but at the same time I was like, okay, well, there's got to be more to this story, and sure enough, there was. And now we know that's going to lead to many new faces this year, new places. We know that Jay Gruden's already out. Other coaches are probably getting fired. Freddie Kitchens might not make it. The Browns team, I don't know what they're doing. I don't think they know what they're doing. Freddie definitely doesn't know what he's doing. So things there are not shaping up. They're 6-8 right now. They're not looking too hot to make any sort of progress because everybody wants to get out. Jarvis Landry is reportedly talking to the Cardinals on the sidelines, telling them to come get. He wants to be free. Trade for him. Odell Beckham. We saw the pictures of him talking to Jimmy Garoppolo. Just it's a lot of dysfunction, and it went downhill fast. And I laughed because I talked about this on the last one again. Mike Francesa was trying to rag on Odell Beckham and saying that he's a cancer in the locker room and that's why they're falling apart. But Kitchens can't control it. You got Baker Mayfield who's out here just talking and snapping at reporters. Meanwhile, he's not having a great season himself, having that sophomore slump of a season. But you're supposed to automatically say that, oh, no, you're right, Odell Beckham is the issue here. That doesn't make any sense. And I felt like it was disingenuous, and it felt like it was just trying to pile on because it's easy to do. Odell puts himself out there, so he makes himself a target, and Francesa went at the target. I don't know how else to word it other than that, but it wasn't something that I thought was necessary to put on Odell. I'm going to switch gears to the NBA and start off by saying kudos to Andrew Wiggins for taking that step in his career that I don't think many people saw him making a few years ago when Jimmy Butler was in there, just a year or so ago when Jimmy Butler was in practice busting everybody behind with the backups. And of course, the story came out. It wasn't necessarily all that dramatic. And it was being sold and stuff like that. That's cool. But I think it's still cool that he's out here averaging 25 points, 5.2 boards, and 3 assists a game. He's finally blossoming. It's a career high in points. He's averaging. He's shooting 45% from the floor. It's his highest since his second year in the league. And the Timberwolves are competitive. That's, I think, about all anyone, especially Timberwolves fans, could have asked for. Now they're getting it. I think that what's going to be important for him is to keep trying to round out his game, though. Keep trying to work on being a facilitator. And honestly, just don't lose that edge. And if it took Jimmy Butler calling you out and saying things, and then the opinion of you changing across the league to make it happen, so be it. It happens to everybody. I've been a supporter of his, and I've long said that a lot of the reason I thought that he struggled was because you get so many mixed signals. I've said this a lot about a lot of young players. They come into the league expected to be the top guy, right? You're praying to be the number one guy. You get all the hype, all the hoopla, all the fanfare. Well, in Wiggins' case, you're traded before anything happens. That's fine. You don't look at that bad. Well, then you get young guys like Wiggins and Cat who are both trying to grow and find themselves, and you bring in a tough, hard-edged guy like Jimmy Butler. They weren't ready to be what Jimmy Butler needed as teammates, which is why now he's with a veteran team in the Heat, and they're doing very well. But in the long run, I think it ultimately paid off for them because it did give them a little bit of an edge and kind of callous them towards the criticism that are going to come for them, but also make them want to get better themselves. That's important. And I'm talking about Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns. I don't know necessarily that Wiggins has reached his potential, but I think he's getting there. And I think that if he keeps this up, that we might be seeing him actually on the cusp of becoming what everyone envisioned for him when he was coming out of Kansas. I just wanted to say a shout out to him because I like stories like that. Everybody does. I'm not alone in that. That's a good thing to see, especially for a player who's been in the league and had so much. I don't want to call it controversy. It's really not that big of a, people talking, saying they don't like the game or whatever. He just got a max contract, so somebody liked his game. But it is nice to see him finally finding his way in the NBA. And then to switch gears to the Cleveland teammate who actually got, I don't want to say got, that sounds so bogus to say it, but the team that Wiggins got traded from, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and their prodigal son, LeBron James. Kevin Garnett was in the media talking about how he had Bron and them boys shook, sent Bron to Miami. I talked about that last episode, and I said, it's funny that people are disagreeing with KG because he's right in that he got LeBron to go to Miami. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing or that he was necessarily scared. I think, like I said before, it's the blueprint. It's the modern version of the blueprint because it's been around for the longest. But every few years, you got to get reminded. And people don't really attack Kevin Garnett because of how his situation came about. It was a trade. It wasn't him free agency, him and his buddies teaming up and all that kind of stuff. So I think that it kind of gets lost on everyone, the fact that that Bron, what he did was definitely in response to what the Celtics did, but it wasn't worse in any way, shape, or form because he chose to do it. I think what it was what we see now, the players controlling their own fate. And I'm not one of those people who can find fault in that. I don't know how you think that that's a bad thing. Oh, the players are just all going to want to team up. That's not necessarily true. We've already seen that. We've already seen how a lot of these guys, at least the younger guys, come in there saying, I don't want to do that. You got the Dames and the CJs who want to do something where they are. So you'll get it. But I think you'll also get a lot of those guys who are coming in, especially as the time goes on, who are going to be further removed from LeBron's impact like that, in that way, and they're going to want to beat those kind of teams. So that's also good. I don't think that anyone should try to control how the game is being played in terms of a big picture. We've seen it go from big threes now to duos. We'll see if it goes back because it historically has been about three-headed monsters. Even my favorite team, the championship Bulls run was threes. It was anchored by a duo of Scotty and Mike, but they needed that big. They had a lot of supporting cast. So we're not, But my point is just that I just find it hilarious that Kevin Garnett. Now Gary Payton got into it too. We won't get to what Gary Payton was saying, but Gary Payton was kind of telling KG, "Boy, you better stop because you was in Minnesota about ready to dip out the same way before he got traded." So that is what it's just funny that. And I don't know. I have to watch it again. KG was talking. He was definitely capping, but I don't know if it was necessarily wrong enough for people to be upset. Now he might have said it gruffly and in a way that didn't make as much sense, and that's probably what Peyton at least was reacting to. But it's not wrong. He did send him to Miami. He sent him to go. You know what? I see KG. They got those big three. I can't match up with the big three with the team that I have here in Cleveland. I'm going to go and do what I can do because Cleveland, look at what Cleveland has done. Look at it. look at what Cleveland done without him. If it wasn't for lucking up into Kyrie, let's stop this. That's all I'm saying. Let's just stop trying to find the reasons to be like, yeah, Bron, yeah, you're not that good. Come on, man. Get off that. The man's going to be gone in a few years and people are going to be salty about it. And I'm not even a fan like that, to the point where I'm usually advocating that people lay off. But this one is just kind of like, all right, it's one of them where when KG said it, I probably would have just been like, oh, yeah, and just knew in my head that he's probably selling it a little bit more than need be. Still talking about Bron. Doc Rivers said that the Lakers' philosophy, now remember, both of these teams lost tonight. Doc Rivers said that the Lakers' philosophy is whatever Bron runs. This was in regards to load management. We know Kawhi has sat out like a third of the games already. Bron is playing most games, and he said if I'm healthy and I can play, why wouldn't I go play? And he's clearly trying to prove a point. And actually, I picked Bron to be my dark horse MVP before the season started, and I did it. I don't want to say tongue in cheek, but I did it kind of half jokingly, saying, with all the wash talk, I'm gonna go Oppo, LeBron for MVP. I might have been on to something. I'm just saying. But more importantly, the load management thing and him saying he's going to play if he's healthy, that's cool now, but it's a long season still. He's going to need some rest, and it's going to be on the coaches to protect him from himself. I don't know if the long game would say, hey, you know what? I don't know if it would be better for them to try to manage it proactively, or as he's feeling it, that's when they do it, which is probably what they're going to end up doing. But I think if they do it proactively, that would help him preserve a lot more energy and keep that extra spring that we've seen in his step so far this season. And before I switch gears from that, I want to talk about how we'll switch gears. We'll go right into the next phase. We'll go to the late game first, and then we'll talk about the early game. No, we'll stick with the Lakers. The Bucks took out the Lakers 111-104. Giannis had 34-11 and 7 points. He was 5 of 8 from 3. Giannis is shooting 32% from deep this year on a career-high 5 attempts. And he's got a career-high 12 rebounds per game, 12.8 rebounds per game. But he's shooting only 59% from the free throw line. That's a career worst. I'm not sure. Eye contact. I'm not sure exactly what it is that he's got to do to convince everybody that he's, if not now, right on the verge of being the best player of the NBA. You don't see too many people who are doubting that still, but he's right there. And you saw it tonight where they tried their best to stop him. Anthony Davis tried to get them the Lakers back into the game. He finished with 36 points on 11 of 25 shooting. He was 0 of 6 from deep, though. LeBron finished 21 of 8 of 19, and Danny Green had 21, 7 of 13. He was shooting the lights out of the gym, 7 of 12 from deep. But the Lakers didn't get anything from anybody on the bench. The next one was Kentavious Caldwell-Pope had 18 points. But after that, 4, 2, and 2 between JaVale McGee, Dwight Howard, and Rajon Rondo, respectively. Avery Bradley had played 17 minutes and was 0 of 2. Alex Caruso played 16 minutes and was 0 of 1. They're going to need some more help from the bench. If they're trying to do anything, they did not have Kyle Kuzma tonight, so obviously that played a big part of it. But even then, Kuzma needs to be set up, and they kind of need an extra guy who can do it himself. I would like to see, and I saw the suggestion, so it's not my original idea all the way, but I was thinking about it as well because I talked about this earlier. Might have been before the season even started, but Jamal Crawford. Matter of fact, it was right when Melo got signed, or right before Melo got signed. We talked about some of the most notable guys who were still available. And Melo was on the list, but Jamal Crawford was one that I didn't really understand because Melo was getting some buzz, but there was none about JC, and he doesn't have nearly the baggage that Melo has. And that bench is 12 and 10 respectively. The next guy was Danny Green with 4, who tied Dwight Howard with 4. But on the Bucks side, Giannis, like I said, had 34. You had Chris Middleton getting 15. He was 5 of 10 from the floor. Wes Matthews had 13, 4 of 9 on 4 of 9 shooting, and then Brook Lopez had 10 on 3 of 8. And then off the bench, George Hill was lights out from 3 at points in this game, 7 of 12, 3 of 5 from deep. The Bucks look like a team that's ready to go back to the Eastern Conference Finals, and Giannis looks like a guy who's trying to win a back-to-back MVP award. We'll see if he does, if he keeps it up this whole season, but he's having a tremendous year. If he could just get those free throw numbers up, that'd be great because he's improved a lot as a three-point shooter, but from the charity stripe, man, you can't regress that much. It's weird that he got that much better from deep, but not at the stripe. We got that much worse at the stripe. That's just an odd, I think, occurrence of happenstance. And then in the late game, the Houston Rockets gave up 69 points in the first half to the Los Angeles Clippers, but ultimately ended up coming back on the strength of a strong third quarter where the Clippers couldn't make nothing and the Rockets were getting a hell of an effort from Russell Westbrook, who finished with a season-high 40 points. 40 points on 13 to 31 shooting. He was 2 assists from deep. He had 10 rebounds. He also had 8 turnovers. You know how Russ gets. Russ always going to give you a dash of the bad. Harden had 28 points, 8 of 16, 5 of 11 from deep. Clint Capella had 16. PJ Tucker had 10. Daniel House had 10. And then Austin Rivers off the bench had 10. That third quarter was horrendous for the Clippers, and it showed. And what made it even worse was that Lou Williams got ejected. He's just coming back off of an injury. He's had 6 points, and apparently the referee said something to him after a foul that Lou Will felt was not a good call. Didn't look like a good call, to be honest with you, but that's irrelevant after what happened after that, because the referee apparently said something to Lou Will. Lou Will took offense to it and got to call him some kind of name. He called him everything but a child of God, okay? And he got ejected for it. Russell Westbrook ended up catching a tech because later on in the game, Pat Bev would end up getting thrown out of the game. It was a wild night. Beverly had fouled out already, so he wasn't going to be playing regardless. But it was a wild night. Pat Bev and Russ have a little history. Russ had recently said that when Harden went off for that 47 points, that Pat Beverly tricks everybody into thinking that he's playing defense and that he just runs around out there. Harden for most of this game was struggling, but they did go off and complete the comeback. They were down pretty big for a lot of this game and just showed resolve. And like I said, Harden was struggling in the first half. He only had 7 points, 3 turnovers to 2 field goals. So it wasn't a good look for him. Russ was struggling too. As I pull up the stats, every time I try to give you guys a stat, it wants to freeze on me right before I get to the number. In the first half, they were combined 22 points, 9 of 22 from the field, but 3 of 3 from free throws. In the second half, they went off for 46 points, 12 of 23 from the field, 16 of 18 from the line. So they got to attacking the basket, and that was a noticeable difference. They stopped selling for the jump shots, and they gave a counter punch. They had that change up ready, and I think that that's what Russell Westbrook actually brings to this offense, to this team. Everybody says that they can't play together because they're so ball dominant, but they're so different in styles that I don't think that one really impacts the other because they're not trying to do the same things at the same time. The Rockets, we know, are a team that wants layups or threes, but they're a finesse team. They're a team that they can get physical because they have the Clint Capella presence. PJ Tucker's a dog on the defense. But they are a team that I think most would describe as more finesse than anything, hard with the nuance in his game. But Russ has a kind of bull in the china shop aggression to him that's a wonderful change of pace for the rest of this offense. And you saw it at one point where you would have the rest of the Rockets come down and set up around the perimeter, and they go around the horn with the ball, and then here comes Russ flying in like a freight train with no brakes right to the rim, getting the pass and just yamming on somebody. But aside from that, he and Harden, but he was also making beautiful dimes, the right plays to open teammates all night long. And I watched it tonight against this competition. Now, granted, like I said, they lost Pat Bev, they lost Lou Will. But I watched them tonight against this competition. I just wondered to myself, how could people really have doubted that they would work together? Why? And they said, oh, they could be friends, but it's not going to happen. Look, they've both been scorned by moves that they thought would help out by their organizations. They are friends, and they both have had the criticism heaped upon them of guys who have not wanted the big one. That can bring you together. That doubt, that we see it in politics. That kind of us against the world mentality can be very, very valuable in getting a team together and having the guys be organized. I think we're seeing that with the Rockets and what Russ and what Harden are doing. I loved it. That's my dark horse team to make the conference finals in the West. To make it out of the West, I think it'll be LA teams. One of the two. I said the Lakers. I'm sticking with the Lakers. I think it'll be them versus the Clippers in the Western Conference Finals. I could see the Rockets getting there, and if they do, apparently if they play the Clippers better watch out. Kawhi Leonard finished this game with 25 points, 9 of 19 shooting. He had some rough stretches where he just couldn't hit anything. His shot has looked really flat this year. I know it looks flat a lot of the time, but it looks extra flat, which is probably why he's getting all the load management that he's getting. He had 9 rebounds and 4 assists. Paul George finished with 34 points. He had 9 rebounds, 3 assists. And then you had 10 from Pat Bev. You had 19 from Montrezl Harrell. You had 13 from Landry Shamet, who was on fire from deep when the Clippers made their comeback after being up. Like I said, this was a wild back and forth game. But what I think ultimately came out of it was that the Clippers are not there yet. They're missing pieces just like the Lakers are. Like I said, the Lakers could use a Jamal Crawford. The Clippers could use Iggy. I think the Clippers could use another guy who can defend on the wing, who can get a 3 when you need. He's not going to count on the first 3s, obviously, but he can handle the ball, run the offense. He can defend. And that seems to be a thing, obviously, on their team, that they want some guys with length who can defend, and that's Iggy. He's got the championship medal to him. So, yeah, you know what? Let's not wrap it up, but we're going to wrap up this portion with signing the Lakers Jamal Crawford and somehow finding a way for Iguodala to get to the Clippers. I know the Grizzlies said that they weren't planning on moving him, but man, I don't know why. I'm teams play hardball all the time. The Clippers need to try. I don't know who they could trade. They probably don't have much ammunition. They would have to give rid of somebody that they actually use who contributes. They gave away most of. I can't believe. I think to 2022 with their draft picks went to Oklahoma City. They gave the draft picks from here to infinity and beyond to Oklahoma City in order to get Paul George. So who knows what they can actually pull off. But I do think that both the LA teams are player away. Now, those Bucks and Rockets teams, I picked the 76ers to come out of the East. But Milwaukee, obviously, they made it last year. They have the reigning MVP who looks like he's well on his way to repeating as MVP. Don't count them out. I can't count them out. I don't think I did. I still think that they were the ones who reached the Eastern Conference Finals against the Sixers. I just thought that the Sixers starting 5, which in the playoffs is highly important to me, which is why I've been so heavily on the side of the Lakers, as most have, to be the teams representing the West in the finals. The Lakers or the Clippers, that is, for the majority of the people who are taking stock of the league. I just think that the Bucks and the Rockets are two teams that match up well with those higher caliber teams, and they are able to exploit the weaknesses that they don't have. See, so for instance, the Bucks have Giannis. Obviously, that's a mismatch that nobody wants, and you could talk about his numbers when guarded by LeBron, but LeBron doesn't want to face him now. These are the matchups, and you saw it tonight, where a player like LeBron is looking to prove that he is the next up, and that the guy who he's going against, time is over. And I think I don't know if he did it ostensibly, because you got to beat the man to beat the man to be the man. Giannis hasn't won anything yet, but he definitely is well on his way to establish himself as the best player. And then in terms of the Rockets, when they are matched up with the Lakers, their guards are going to tear the Lakers guards up. Now, Danny Green's going to give some fits to Harden and to Russ, but he's one man. Avery Bradley, can he stay healthy long enough to make that kind of an impact? Mo Harkless's going to be a dog on LeBron. He's going to be on LeBron. He's going to be a dog on Kyle Kuzma. Where the Lakers' advantages obviously is in the paint with Anthony Davis, Dwight Howard, and then the same thing will be for the Clippers with Mo Harkless, or I'm sorry, with Vick Zubac and Montrezl Harrell, but Clint Capella's no slouch. PJ Tucker can guard and is tougher than he looks as for his size, especially against those bigger guys. But those Russ and Harden, are dynamic in such different ways that preparing yourself for both of them on any given possession is almost an impossible task because, like I said, they play such contrasting styles that it complements each other real well. Now, Harden has been known to fade in the playoffs. Russ has been known to shoot his team into oblivion in the playoffs. That's typically not a recipe for good things, but I do feel like the situation that they're in, this is their best chance. So I am definitely rooting to see them do what it is that they do, like they did tonight. It was kind of rough, but they pulled it together, and they it's not how you start, it's how you finish, and they proved that tonight. So that was a great thing for them. You'll notice there was no Bears coverage in tonight's episode. That's because the Bears are eliminated from the playoffs, and I have begun for Last Word on Pro Football breaking down what the Bears could do to retool. I had already covered the quarterbacks and the receivers and running backs in previous editions a couple of weeks ago before they had gotten themselves back into playoff contention. Since they are out, no, I did resume, and it is beginning with the offensive line. Or resuming with the offensive line, excuse me. You can check that out, like I said, on Last Word on Pro Football, or head over to jukesandjumpers.wordpress.com in the morning, and it should be there as well. And then there was no Bulls news. I'm not sure where I'm at with the Bulls. They are a team that loses games when they have a 26-point lead and wins games when they have when they face an 18-point deficit. I know it's a function a lot of the opponent that they're playing, but I'm just not sure what to believe anymore. They make progress, but they take steps back in the same game, and you just don't know. Like, they lead the league in steals right now, but they are also getting killed on the glass, and opponents are shooting. They're in the bottom of the field goal percentage from the floor. There's just so much going on wrong, and then they pull out a game like that, and you're just like, there's so much talent here, and I think that almost makes it worse, because you know the ability that they had, because you know what we were convincing ourselves of in the summer, and you know what the team was talking about, and they're still talking about it for some reason. And then you see an effort like that, and you're like, well, what the hell? Where's this been? Why can't you guys coach us out now? They're a young team, to use some coach speak. But I'm just not sure exactly where I'm at with them, because they are the Jekyll and Hyde in a game. We know how they blow leads, or how they blow games in late. We know how they have started slow. We know the struggles of Lowry Marketing and how they've had to bring in a trainer that he's worked with in the past to try to get him back on track. We know about the injury to Otto Porter and how his return is nowhere near close, and how they're going to be locked into that contract next year, and how awful that that deal looks now. They could have just kept. They could have just moved Jabari and I'm sorry, they could have just allowed Jabari and Bobby Portis to leave and had that money and sign some short-term deal, because now they're going to be locked in. It's not as if they could have used it on somebody valuable anyway, because of the turmoil that they've had. They're right back where they started before they've embarked on this rebuild that actually had regained them some credibility. So now they're right back at square zero, not even at square one, because square one was starting your rebuild. Now you don't know what you have. You don't know who you got to keep, who's an actual building block aside from Kobe and probably Wendell. What do you do with Zach and Lowry? Do Zach and Lowry even fit together? We can see that they play well. They don't do it often enough, though, and you wonder, is one of them going to be able to take the alpha and start making those alpha decisions, Zach, or is one of them going to be able to be aggressive enough to actually be an alpha, Lowry? And then you just kind of wonder, what's the direction overall? And I can't sit here and say that I see one from the front office, because when you go out and you say that you give a quote, as John Paxson did, saying that Jim Boylan is a grinder, you not only lose credibility when we see how players have tuned him out and how his lineups have cost him games and his decisions have cost him games, and he refuses to call timeouts when the other team is going on a run until the Bulls are down by 1 after they were just up by 11. Stuff like that, and then getting in the press conference and saying that there's no shame in losing to the worst team in the league and doing it twice in less than a couple of weeks. That kind of stuff, to be fed that and saying, it's part of the process. What process? Is the process to just be as bad as possible, as ho-hum, as bleh, as hard to watch as possible? Because if so, mission accomplished. But efforts like that comeback don't help per se, because they just make you wonder or think about what could be, what could have been if they were better longer. And that's probably what's going to be the focus of my article tomorrow for Pip It Ain't Easy. I have to get that going. Like I said, I couldn't figure out necessarily where I was at with this team and what I wanted to say, because they have so much ability, but they have zero consistency and there's zero accountability. It's really bad, and I'm not sure that it's anywhere close to getting better anytime soon. That's going to do it for this episode of 000. I'd like to thank you for joining me. Please follow me on Twitter at Josh G. Buck. You can hit up the Facebook at Jukes and Jumps. You can hit up the email jukesjumps@gmail.com. And of course, the website is jukesandjumpers.wordpress.com. And of course, hit up Last Word on Pro Football. That is the website where I write about the Bears, and then Pippin Ain't Easy for the Bulls stuff. JuiceandJumpers.wordpress.com is where I blog, and you can find all of those archived after the fact. And you can find the episodes of the podcast as well. If you want to be on the podcast, shoot me a DM on Twitter or hit me up in the email. Either way it goes, I will be back. Till the next time, I'm going to see you when I see you. Peace.